So next week it's Fade.
Yes.
It's a longish one. And then the article is one that I wrote in the Yellowstone Tradition. And same thing as this time. And we're going to go over those questions and talk about them. And I've got some questions. I have some questions too. Let's go over some of the assignments that are coming up. And the week after that, I believe, is
Proposals or something of that nature?
Yeah, I think so.
Project decisions?
feed. It's Fade and then Feed. So what I'll have you do that week is it the proposal?
It's an overview, introduction. Yeah.
No, they
All overview of introductions to edited collections.
Okay.
What exactly do you mean by overview?
I think it's just for you to talk about and to hand it in, just an informal thing about what you want to do. Yeah, it's going back to, it's going to be kind of like that. If you were to do this assignment. So pick your topic and just give me a brief review of a paragraph as to what you want to do, what you want your topic to be, and then you'll write a more formal proposal later.
So for next session?
No, for the following session, for the feed session.
But that would be also due on Tuesday, right?
Yes, due Tuesday by noon. Otherwise, if I don't get it early enough, I don't have time to put it together. So be sure to look at the week 6 assignment. If you do plan to do something other than that, suggestions, let me know by now. So that's basically what it is. Where do you want to go? What kind of scholarship are you thinking about with this edited collection that you're going to be to do, or especially if it's in line with if you were to assignment?
And I'm assuming in all those blank spaces where you have online and face-to-face, are those all productive questions
Yes, I think so. But I haven't actually got it all filled out.
Right.
And I'll have it all filled out with the individual weeks on D2L, like I have for weeks 1 through 3.
Okay.
I just got to get caught up with myself. I did get my horse to Missouri.
I was going to
Okay.
ask how he was doing.
I was wondering.
He's doing really well. It's about 10 degrees cooler there.
Oh, that would be lovely.
In fact, I went riding and it was like 82.
Yeah, it was like 68 degrees when I took my kids to school this morning. And
It was?
I was so hopeful, at least where I'm at, 2 hours away from here. But I was so hopeful that it would be a nice day, and then it's flaking down.
Yeah, it's really miserably hot. Where do they go to school?
New Diana, which is just north of Longview, so I'm an hour and 45 minutes away from here now.
Should you mention the sources that you're going to use in our
If you've got a couple, that would be great. Just give me as much information as you can.
But we don't need all 10 right in the beginning.
No, not at all. In fact, I wouldn't expect that because that's just way too much right now. It's way too early for that. But if you have an idea of some, that's helpful. I'm doing this so that I can make sure that you are on the right track.
Okay.
That you know what you're doing, where you're going. You're just pushing it that right a bit. So questions about next week, which is Feed, which is a weird book.
Yeah, I've already started that one. I said nope.
You mean a weirder?
But it's so relevant. Do what?
Do you mean a weirder book?
Yes.
Touche.
Yes.
I didn't find Junior Brown to be weird. It was kind of odd, but
All right. So, first Friday. Hope you can make it. It'll be over in Talbot Hall at 4:30. You can come late. We're going to vote on. It's for CGAD. We're going to vote on officers. Talk about activities you want to engage in the next in the next sessions. And Dr. Kamari. Has anybody met her yet? It's going to be, yeah. Will be there because she really wants to be engaged with graduate students, and I'm happy to see her do that. So come on out. There's evidence that I will have snacks because I'm collecting money from the faculty who don't show up. We might have steaks.
All right, I'll make an extra drive-in this week.
We won't be having steak.
Oh, yeah.
And we talked about next week's assignment. And so what questions do you have so far?
My only question is like, did I do the right kind of questions that you were looking for?
Uh-huh.
So that
You
I
did.
know. Okay.
And you're going to see, I pulled one question from each person. And that way you'll be able to see what's going on with those questions. It'll help you figure things out. We're going to talk about social pathology because the author of the article, Leslie, kept bringing up pathology and pathological, and it's kind of an unusual terminology in if you relate it only to pathology, only to disease. But it's also related. It's metaphorically related to disease. We're going to go over the predictive questions that you've asked, and then that'll be it. So social pathology. Remember, one thing, don't use dictionary definitions. Most of you who've taken my classes already know that. And I looked at a dictionary definition initially, and then I said to myself, I need to be a really good example. Don't. So go to social pathology, go to a text, the expert that deals with social pathology. And I located this, Society and Social Pathology, Critical Political Theory and Radical Practice. How about that? Perfect. And so a definition of social pathology is offered as often leading, quote, to a flood of social, economic, and psychological problems that undermine well-being and therefore need to be considered in developing a mental health policy that promotes population mental health, well-being, and addresses issues that contribute to mental illness.
Amen.
The concept of social pathology becomes a sort of umbrella term for various social problems. And I could say persistent social problems. It is at the discretion of scientists, representatives of social scientists, to provide an explanation of the causes and mechanisms of pathological phenomena in order to enable the implementation and appropriate prophylactic and preventive measures. The term social pathology embraces social problems that are present in common consciousness and are perceived as detrimental and destructive to individuals, groups, or the entire society. So, when a pathologist takes a look at a disease, that pathologist is interested in where it comes from, how it develops, who it affects, and possibly a cure for it. So for social pathologists, and this link is provided for you on the PowerPoint, which is available to you. So in that way, so when we're talking about social pathology, we're looking at persistent problems, how they arise, who they affect, what to do about them, those kinds of things. So it's the same tracing mechanism, if that makes sense, yeah? Because she used it a lot. Did anybody look it up?
I didn't, but I kind of gathered the contextual clues.
Yeah.
I did what you said not to do, even though you had told me not to do it 4 times.
Good job.
And I made an inference based on what I gleaned from the dictionary definition, and it worked for me.
Okay.
At least you
I'm
started
honest.
there and
You're
moved
honest.
forward.
Just remember when it comes to paper time.
Right. Oh, for sure. For sure.
Dictionary.com says,
So here's a question for you. What productive questions serve as the basis for Leslie's article? And I ask that because articles come from questions a researcher has. And that's where you come up with your ideas. You have a question that you want to answer, and that's where a dissertation comes from, a thesis comes from, a paper with an argument comes from. So what productive questions serve as the basis for Leslie's article?
I think she was looking for, like, what are some of the social ills that perpetuate broken systems? Like, specifically for, like, African-American men, since our main characters are Buddy and
Mr. Poole and
Junior.
Junior.
So we have the school, we have the hospital, and we have family.
Yeah, they did the school system, the family
hospital.
system, and the hospital, the medical system.
So she focuses a lot on Julie Brown's mother, and so I picked up on that a lot. Like, not only are we touching on like race and just at the adolescent time period of someone trying to find himself, not only also struggling with the fact that he's overweight, which she mentions, and then he's black.
We need to talk about whether he's overweight or not,
Yeah.
actually.
And then just the fact that his mother is just trying so hard to kind of go against the grain and the stigmatism that kind of comes with being somebody who's already kind of on that outskirts of what is normal, considered normal. And she's trying to force this kind of normal lifestyle on somebody that isn't meant to be put in that category.
And that's what schools do.
I did like that point in her article. In fact, I think I touched on it. Was like that they try to standardize the students and the teachers within that school system.
And you know why? Because it's easier.
Mhm.
Right.
It's just easier.
Well, and that's what my mom and I have talked about this over and over and over again. Like, we have all the, I hope you didn't pick this purposeful question, productive question of mine, because that's touching on one of the ones that I wrote. But talking about, like, even though teachers are trained to be culturally relevant teachers and be aware of the students who are in your classroom and, like, meet them where they are, like, tests aren't given that way. Standardized tests are not that way. Like, most teachers, like, I'm not going to say especially old school, but, like, anybody who has an old school mentality, go in and say, like, I'm going to lecture and you're going to like it. Like, even though that doesn't work for our generation that's sitting in our classrooms anymore. And that's also why so many of our not white populations have higher office referrals. It's not that they come from better families, it's that they come from different cultures and they're being forced into a culture that they don't know. And in order to thrive there, they have to internalize that their culture at home is wrong.
And
It's awful.
it's awful. And at the same time, you cannot, how many students, if you're a high school teacher, how many students do you have?
I have direct influence over 144.
But in the classroom, how many students do most of your
28.
students? 28. And how many sections do they teach?
6.
28 times 6, and these are all different students, is a lot.
So it's close to 180.
You
I had 100.
cannot possibly accommodate every single student. Just can't.
There's no way.
There isn't enough time in a year, let alone a day, to do that.
And that's if they don't have other problems like social problems or emotional problems or 504 plan or special ed or ESL, or like they all have all of these needs. And you're supposed to need 180 of them. And
Yes,
build
that's how come I
relationships with
can't
all
do
of
high
them.
school. It's because I cannot give that much. I can give quite a bit, but not that much. I
It
would
is
be
draining.
sucked dry.
And the few that aren't just screaming neediness seem to they're not the squeaky wheel. And so they just fall away.
Mhm.
They don't get the attention
That they, yeah.
Right.
So it's totally, it's unworkable, the system as it is. And I don't know how it can be made workable, except for look to other countries that do make it work. I think, what is it? Is it Sweden? That's one of the, Finland? Yeah, the cold countries, because nobody goes out. out. They all stay bundled up.
Next to their ears.
If that were the case, Michigan should be really well off.
Well, they don't have standardized tests, and they get recess time all the way through
For
high
play,
school.
because Vygotsky said,
Mhm. Well, even high school students, everybody needs a break.
My kids are in middle school and they don't have recess now. Like,
Just a 30-minute lunch, and it's like bell to bell all day long.
oh man, that
And
is,
we're told to do that. We're told, do not, there shouldn't be any break, there shouldn't be any rest. Like, if you have a brain break, it's a minute and then you go. Like, you teach from bell to bell.
no wonder
For
my
90
kids go to
minutes,
sleep
because it's a
at
lot
6 o'clock.
in high school.
It's nuts because like, my son comes home by 6 o'clock. He's done. He's crashed till the next morning. So
great system you have in place. If we look at Leslie's article at the bottom of page 125, if you look at her argument, that will give you the question that she's trying to answer. She reads, I do not agree that Hamilton's portrayal of power undercuts her critique of racism. In fact, I feel that she exposes the ways in which the ingrained practices of power corrupt individuals at every level of society. Hamilton herself states that she is committed both to portraying her characters within a Black social order as in the case in real life. And if you go to the bottom of that paragraph, by allowing Buddy and the reader to recognize facets of experience as social constructions, Hamilton does offer a way for marginalized characters to occupy positions of power without simply replicating oppressive values. So so if we turn this into a question, it would be, on this last one, how does Hamilton offer a way for marginalized characters to occupy positions of power without simply replicating oppressive values? So that's the question she's answering through all of this, and she's answering it by looking at various institutions. And that's a productive question. It's a really productive question. It's productive enough to write a really long article. I know it's kind of vague about how to get to these questions, but it's work, and you have to really pay attention, because that's part of it. Okay, a couple questions from me, because it's all about me. So these are some of what I think would be productive questions. First person narrators can easily be unreliable. And why can they be unreliable?
because you can't see anybody else's perspective.
No, they really are.
They can be deceiving themselves.
And they can be lying.
They can be horribly biased.
Young narrators are, or not young, young first person narrators might exaggerate, might not understand, have a good sense of context. And when I said lie, that's Holden Caulfield in Catcher in the Rye, because he says outright that I lie. But then if he says he lies, can we believe that he lies? I don't know. It's a mess. It's a mess. Can easily be unreliable. The third person narrators are supposed to be reliable for the most part, and even somewhat objective as they tell the focalizer story. Now, by focalizer, I use that instead of character, because the focalizer is a very specific character in a text. It's one whose eyes we see through. So we have several focalizers in this. We have Janella, we have Buddy, we have Junior, Mr. Cool. So we have all of these different focalizers, and it's the job of the narrator to convey their story in a believable way, so that we have to trust somebody in this when they're going through. However, the narrator, though, seems to buy into the somewhat dreamlike quality of the text. And so I thought, does this make the narrator reliable or unreliable? Or can we tell? Because it's conveying those feelings that we get from the focalizer But there seems to be some commentary along the way as well regarding some implicit commentary along the way as to responses and reactions to the characters. And along those lines, Junior Brown is characterized throughout the novel as obese, fat, and so on. However, he is 262 pounds. His name is also Virgil, and his dad's name is not Virgil. So he's not an actual junior, as in, I think it's Walter, maybe, is his name? He's not an actual junior, as in Walter Jr. Now, some people have junior as a nickname, even though they're not a junior of the father. We don't even know if there ever was an actual father. Additionally, the narrator says of Buddy and Junior, they were both tall. They looked older than their years, and their sudden amount of energy often scared people. So my question is, how fat is he really? We keep getting told over and over again, but if he's tall, 262 pounds is not fat, or not that fat.
Not as bad
It's a
as
football
he
player.
is for yeah.
Yeah, he's a lineman.
Yeah. So that's one reason I ask about the reliability of our narrator. Can we trust the narrator, this third person narrator? We don't have to trust what the focalizers think, because they don't. That's just the nature of focalizers. But the narrators, we should be able to.
And I don't know if it was a different, someone different speaking. And I didn't look into group. And were lowering him down, didn't they say he weighed 300? Somebody say that?
Might have.
I think
Yeah,
Buddy
so it could be
said,
in the item.
So, it could be for editing.
Oh,
It could be.
Or it could be he's put on weight since the beginning of the book.
could be on
Because he's super
Because
stressed.
he like one thing that I picked up on is he comfort eats, and that's why he'll eat 6 eggs and like so many rations of bacon, and like just he's trying to fill up a way that it's not fillable.
Mm-hmm.
well, and it's only 30 pounds from what I brought up, but I just meant maybe depends on who's talking. Just like we're saying.
Mm-hmm.
that's the way I interpreted it, because I thought it was towards the end when they said almost 300, I thought that was Buddy saying that, like, oh, he must weigh.
Okay, yeah, I remember who I just remembered.
So that raises some questions about how to read this text and how to think about it. I don't know, I couldn't get an article out of it, but it is a point of interest to think about. And then to look at other narrators, or to look at her narration in general when she writes. She does some magical realism too. So to look at how she treats narrators. Now, that would be an article, and there could be something interesting there, maybe. And one more, this is on the article. Leslie discusses Robin Kelly's article on Malcolm X, writing, I forgot the quotation mark there, despite, I forgot a lot, despite its perceived inhibition of authentic Blackness, Kelly notes that middle-class Blacks who were concerned about a lower-class Nation of Islam center opening in a neighborhood had themselves faced opposition from middle-class whites in the neighborhood. Whether authentic is Kelly's word or Leslie's word, I see it as problematic. What does it mean to be authentic anything? What characteristics suggest authenticity? And we won't go into that at this point because I want to go to your questions in a minute, but you can, okay, so that's how I think that's a pretty productive question. And then here's the other one. Leslie, and this fascinated me, Leslie claims that Malik's and Poole's race is ambiguous. I read them as Black, however. Did anybody read them as white or anything but Black? You read them as...
Poole I read as white, and for some reason I read Malik is of Asian descent.
The newspaper.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I picked up on Tool being Black, but yeah, the newspaper guy, I didn't figure was.
And I thought he was more in the radical line of not necessarily Black Panthers, but the Malcolm X, the down with, the whole don't let the system repress you kind of thing. So that's how I got it.
Because whenever he was like, oh yeah, he'll be my uncle, I'm like, if he comes in, it's gonna be blatantly obvious. Like, I don't know how that's gonna work, but okay.
Uncle by marriage.
But I know, so I don't know. That makes more sense now.
Yeah, and it didn't occur to me to think of either of them as anything but Black. And I wondered if that was because it's some kind of default, like white becomes normalized in the world, but in a book about Black characters,
We just assume they're all.
they're all Black unless we're told something different. It's kind of a reverse normalization.
So I was listening to the audiobook version.
Me too.
And Malik, he has a Middle Eastern accent. I mean, the narrator has put him in a Middle Eastern accent. But I imagine him as a darker Middle Eastern person.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, I didn't think of him as white. I didn't think of him as Black actor.
I also read him as Middle Eastern, but I'm not sure what text there was to support that.
Hold on, our sound isn't good.
I just said that I also read him as like Middle Eastern or something like that. But I'm not sure that there was text to support it. Maybe that's just how it looked in my head when they described taking over the family business and like in that section. I don't know.
Okay.
Well, I looked his last name for some reason sent me to Asia. I don't know.
It sent me to more like perhaps a Muhammad Ali change going from what was Cassius Clay to Muhammad Ali. I don't know. And we don't know a thing about Buddy's parents. Not 1 ounce. There is nothing. And somebody mentioned that about absence, and I think I've included that. So there's that. I know we discussed the idea of invisibility in class, and we're looking to see how it was used within an adolescent novel, but what about the concept of absence? And that's exactly what I was talking about just now. Buddy Clark's entire family is clearly absent. How has that affected him mentally, physically, emotionally? Junior Brown's father is obviously absent. What does that contribute to his mental break at the end of the novel? Even Janella Brown experiences the absence of her husband. How does this affect the way she mothers Junior? How does this influence his downward spiral? So Buddy Clark's family, we don't know if he's middle class, he's been sent to foster homes.
Well, it says that he was left where he was leaving, where he had been living with his mom. And that they had tried to get, I guess these child protective services, tried to get him, but he outsmarted them and, managed to dodge them and lose them in all these buildings. But aside from that, there's really no.
Yeah, and he says that the narrator says of the last foster home, why didn't he stay there? Or he says that.
Like what? They were the only people that would have ever taken care of him.
Yeah, he left a good place.
Yeah.
And we don't know his fears that precipitated that.
Wait, wasn't he living in an apartment complex before he was abandoned and then he was sleeping in the hallway?
Yeah, and then he would, and some people would sometimes take him in,
Right.
but then the other children would get jealous. And so back to the hallway he would go.
But only if our narrator is reliable.
Yeah, and I don't know what to make of that anymore. It kind of throws a lot of doubt on everything we're told in some ways. We have to figure out what to believe and what not to believe. Buddy Clark's entire family. Junior Brown's father is obviously absent if he was ever there to begin with. Janella could have gotten pregnant, and the father was never made it into the.
Well, the question there then is, how do they live the middle class life? Because she doesn't work apparently. We don't ever see where she's, working.
Something about He must send money.
Right. It mentions that he's away for work. And so I'm thinking, my thought process was that at some point there was a relationship and he did go away for work and he probably chose to stay away from work.
Because Janella's not well, and neither is Buddy. I mean, Junior. And my thought was like, how much of that did she put on Junior? And that's why Junior is unwell. Because you see that a lot in codependent relationships. Uh-huh.
I thought that was, it's like she was making up a lot of things to kind of keep him,
Asthma.
yeah. Well, not just in herself, but like she was kind of stunting Junior himself. Like, oh, you can't do this because of
Right,
X,
like
Y, Z.
taking the strings out of the piano and only being allowed to paint decent things and, you
It's
know.
definitely a control issue.
Right, and so that, I feel like that severely contributed to his own mental health breakdown.
Mm-hmm.
She just kept feeding him and feeding him. What is that called when you keep someone sick?
Munchausen.
Munchausen is by proxy.
Well, it's not that she would feed him, it's that he would feed himself, but she wouldn't do a thing to stop him. Do you remember after she takes the Weight Watchers, she makes him that diet breakfast, and he's like, nah, son, and makes his own breakfast. And then she just stands there and watches it. I'm like, I would have been like, no, I'm taking the food away. I'm like,
Or you buy the food in such a way that you don't have a whole lot there.
Mm-hmm.
Like, why, she expected him, it's like a game. Like, I'm gonna tell you no, knowing that you're going to go into the refrigerator and
do it
clean out all the
anyway.
bacon.
Right.
Like, that's why I bought it, so it's there for you. Like, Junior's not going and doing that himself.
Well, yeah, you know, I've seen that in relationships before. So when I've experienced it, my husband and I was thinner then than I am now by far, but he would say, "Put me on a leash and roll me down the street." No, pretty bad, right? And then he'd say, "Let's go out and eat." Okay, so.
mixed signals much?
Yeah. Yeah, he thought that was really funny.
My ex was like that too.
Dr. Stewart, can y'all hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, I have a really bad lag, so I just want to make sure. My daughter was in a severe accident this summer, and long story short, she fell on a grill and had first and second degree burns and was life flighted. And, y'all were discussing the mother's control over her son. And I kind of related that to what I went through this summer when Evelyn was in the hospital. She refused to eat or drink. And I'm talking about, we were bringing milkshakes in to get this girl to, have something in her system, and she just would not do it. And I was terrified that we were never going to be able to leave because she just wouldn't eat or drink. And a lot of the doctors told me that that is the only thing that she could control in that moment. She couldn't control everything else that was happening to her. And so that kind of made me think about Junior's mother, because, she can't really control the asthma thing, but she can control
Actually, but that can be, asthma is one of those diseases that can pretty easily be, what do they call that?
Managed. It's managed.
It's managed, but it's from hypochondria
Yeah.
sometimes.
What it is she's probably having a panic attack and it's causing.
Yes. So.
But I mean, to her, that's not controllable. Now we look at it and we're like, yeah, it is. But to her, that's an uncontrollable thing. But she can control what her son, to an extent, I would have probably slapped the bacon out of his hand too, but she can control those parts of him.
Mm-hmm.
So.
And he's grown up that way, so it's okay with him.
Right.
Right.
I mean,
It's so codependent.
It's been the standard flow for all these years. So, just like that little toy that he has,
Mm-hmm.
in the article it talks about how it's kind of a manipulation tactic on Junior's part because he knows that his mom's going to respond the same way every time.
Mm-hmm.
She had him in a couple of other ways too. Remember that she kind of had her voice was kind of a soundtracking in his mind.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of the time he would scold himself.
Yeah,
In
he's
her
totally
words.
internalized
Yeah.
everything that she would say.
And you're right, and she also held him prisoner by the weekend visits. The weekend visits that never happened.
And never were going to happen, and she knew that. Somebody mentioned it later, I think I posted it. Somebody mentioned about eating as being the one thing that Junior Brown can control. That it gives him a sense of control over his life, because he can't control anything else. And so he eats uncontrollably to control his life.
That's a common eating disorder signal.
Mm-hmm.
You know, either the not eating or the eating is because of it being a control thing, not because the desire is there to eat.
But it's something they have control over.
But you know, by the same token.
And
she was
apparently it's
so,
very common in children
Yes,
when they're going through something traumatic like that.
yes, definitely.
She was, he kind of had her number, because all he had to do was roll up that canvas. She didn't look. She only saw it because it was spread out. She didn't take the trouble. For a censor, she did a poor job.
Yeah.
Didn't take the trouble and roll the thing. I've been curious, I wonder why, even if it wasn't a censor.
Yeah.
Yeah, but at that age, okay, so my kids are middle school now this year, and we're entering that I want my privacy phase of life, and I'm just like, and so at that point too, you're wanting to, you know, you're not getting necessarily, you're not reading the kid's diary, and that's kind of how I viewed the painting particularly. And she might not have known it was there, that particular one, but I mean,
She said, I'm never gonna get him a canvas again.
Mm-hmm.
So it's been her.
right.
But it was a very passive aggressive way to take care of it. Like,
That's right.
I'm gonna
She's
steal
totally
it,
passive aggressive.
And I'm
tear
gonna
it up,
sit
I'm
here and
gonna
wait for you
burn
to
it,
come
I'm
talk to
gonna
me.
wait for you to come and tell me that it's gone. Like, what kind of parenting is that?
Not good.
And he knew this,
And
and
she
he
was
forgot, he realized that he forgot to, he knew before he got home.
Oh, yeah.
And then she
But
was,
did he forget?
and then
I mean,
she was all
he
like, I'm
did,
gonna wait
but-
till your father gets home. I'm like, but he's not gonna come home and deal with this, so what is gonna get done?
Maybe Junior wanted her to find it.
Probably.
Find it.
Well, I
He
mean,
was
it's
coming
you love
into his
me
own.
kind of thing,
Uh-huh.
like continuing to push it. Like, are you, you know, they say that if you love me, then you'll discipline me. She lets him just run and do whatever he wants. She may give him a stern look, but like,
Yeah, if my kids said, hey, so-and-so's coming over for dinner, you better have dinner ready, I'd be like, what? Excuse me?
try again.
One aspect of the novel I felt unsure and perhaps a bit unsatisfied with is the quick remedy that seemingly cures Junior Brown's mental illness. The figment of his imagination dissipates at the end of the novel once Junior is received into the shelter given by Tomorrow Billy, all done without seeking medical help. I felt alternatively warmed by this notion of a new planet filled with a family having each other's back, but it also felt dangerous to overlook the benefit of seeking professional help for an undiagnosed mental ailment. As I read Leslie's article, I realized my own ignorance of why Buddy had justified reasons to fear for how a hospital would look out for his friend, worried they would want to erase who Junior is. Leslie cites research that states a history of white value-dominated medical professionals mistreating and misdiagnosing African-American patients. Although I understand Buddy's rejection of a hospital for his friend, I still ended the novel worried about Junior. The section on the medical system in Leslie's article was the only portion that left me unsatisfied, as I felt it ended abruptly. A question I would like to pose to the class is, after reading both the novel and the medical system section of Leslie's article, what thoughts do you have pertaining to Junior Brown's mental illness and his future after the book closes?
I didn't feel like it was remedied at the end. While yes, they indicate that that particular figment of his imagination kind of dissolves a little bit. That when it comes to, okay, so when it comes to mental illness and hallucinations, they change a lot. And my thought, actually, once I read the end of the book, my thoughts were about how much of the book itself, from when we're reading from Junior's perspective, is actually happening. Because for all we know, Junior could have been hallucinating the whole time. And having worked in a mental health facility, it's a concern that, even not just with African American patients, but with patients in general, that most doctors will overtreat, misdiagnose, shove them full of pills. And then, these patients basically lose who they are. Just because, when we would take patients into our hospital, a new patient would have 20 new medication orders, between vitamins and antipsychotics. And it's just like, and then you're only there for 2 weeks, and it's like, well, I hope this works.
Bye.
Yeah.
Have a good life.
And that's today's mental health system. So I can't even imagine what it could have been like before.
And somebody asked, I think in one of their questions about that very thing, how was mental health treated during the period that Hamilton's writing this in the 1970s.
She talks about illnesses a lot, mental and health illnesses. I don't know. I was wondering if she was trying to shine light on something that needed attention.
I think so. There was, I'm not sure, I don't remember when it all came about. There was a period, 2 weeks in the hospital. It used to not be limited, and then the government said
it's limited by your insurance. Like if we had Medicare patients, you're only given so many days, not just per year, but per lifetime to be within a facility.
Yeah.
And so if we had a patient stay for 3 or 4 or 5 weeks or come back, then, once their Medicare wasn't going to cover it anymore, they'd be self-pay. And half the time we would never see money from it. And so it's ridiculous.
Yeah. And it didn't used to be that way. They could stay in a hospital for as long as they needed, even if that was permanently, if I'm not mistaken. And then they turned it around to the system we have now. And it happened pretty suddenly. So all of a sudden, the streets, because so many became homeless, because they didn't have the capacity to hold down a job, they already didn't have a place to live. So suddenly, there's this enormous homeless population, homeless mentally ill population. And it was considered a health crisis, a crisis. And it still had, it wasn't repaired by them staying in hospitals endlessly, being pumped full of drugs, but turning them out wasn't either. And then
you have no access to help at that point either.
Yeah, because you don't have an address. They get thrown into jail for being homeless, and it's never ending impossibility.
And that happens to kids. Like the hospital that I used to work with, they don't anymore, but they used to have a youth board. They would take kids upwards, as young as 5 to 18, all housed together. And the stories I heard, thankfully they don't do that anymore. But other hospitals do. And having a child with I have a child who's got mental health issues, and at the age of 7, that was one of my options at one point, was to institutionalize, and I was just like, I can't even imagine. But it's still a thing.
Very much so. Alex, this is you. Leslie further describes how Buddy works at self-erasure as paradoxically a defense against erasure. Might Buddy's compulsion not to be caught by the system, which in essence indicates that the system already has him, be a reflection of Bentham's panopticon? So the panopticon is it's a method that Jeremy Bentham came up with for prison to have a better system of surveillance, but also for the inmates to self-monitor, and so the idea was to have this big tower in the middle of an area in the middle where the cells surrounded that tower, and you couldn't see in the windows. So there was no way of knowing whether there were prison guards or not. The Nazis used the same principle. They didn't always have guards in those guardhouses that stood. But the assumption was that they were there, and they would shoot. So it was a method of helping the prisoners to, like I said, self-monitor. And that method is called the panopticon. Panopticon meaning all-seeing. So go ahead and talk about your idea.
It just felt like far more than any character, like Buddy was always aware of the situation that he was in, who was around him, how he might be interpreted by others, and how to basically be like a chameleon.
Oh, he was good at that.
Like he didn't miss a beat saying, oh, my uncle is gonna come up to the school.
My Asian uncle.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, I mean, he just always had like the temperature of the room and like reading Mr. Roundtree's like presentation and body language and, oh, I need to act this way with him. And I need to act this way with the teacher who's never seen me before.
And on the bus depot where the train station, you know, just like.
Really good at that. Lit up a cigarette.
Paper.
Yeah.
I'm gonna need Alex to turn around so I can see what he looks like throwing out those big words like that.
Who was it? Was Foucault, Michel Foucault, who he found the work that Bentham had come up with. I think it was during the 1800s that Bentham came up with this idea. And Michel Foucault, a psychoanalyst, but I was very interested in understanding how power works. He is the one who wrote about it, I think, in Discipline and Punish, which is really a clear book.
I think it was published the same year as this, in 1971.
Really?
I think so.
Interesting.
I think so.
Don't count on it.
No,
You don't carry guns, right? Well,
dang it.
I swore my parents had eyes in the back of their heads. They were, and the panopticon exists on all levels.
Oh,
Santa
yeah.
Claus, God, anywhere you look. On buses. Yeah, on buses, in the parking lot. It's a deterrent, and it's also a protective measure, depending on how you look at it. So if you know that you're being surveilled,
Or the possibility of being surveilled. We had fake security cameras up on my house when I was a kid.
yeah, exactly.
I mean, I've heard, you know how homes have those security systems? I've heard you don't need them. You just need the sticker that says this is protected by security system.
That's exactly what the cops told me when my car was keyed twice in like a month. They were like, don't buy the cameras, just get the stickers. I was like, oh, okay.
Okay.
Did it work?
Cheaper. Oh, well, my car wasn't keyed again, so I guess so.
That's funny. What role does this is Daisy. What role does Mr. Poole and the solar system play in Buddy's resistance to the system? Buddy does not have a father, and he initially teaches the boys on his planet that they must learn to only look after themselves and not each other. However, he still views Mr. Poole as a father figure. What does this mean when thinking about his underlying views on family?
Well, I guess that everybody needs someone to look up to. Everybody needs a mentor, especially at that age when they're going through a time period where they're trying to find their identity. And I think I don't remember what stage of development Erickson said, but it's like identity versus, I don't know, it's something like that. You know what I'm talking about? Yeah. So they're struggling with finding this identity and where they fit in society. And so I think that would be a role that Mr. Poole plays in Buddy's life, but also in Junior Brown's life too.
And potentially, because, we see a little bit further on in the book that Buddy knows that he's missing something in his plan. It can't really figure out what is there. And I'm wondering if Mr. Poole having taken him kind of under his wing is what prompted that thought for him, that there's something more that I could be doing for these kids, because Mr. Poole is
Look what he did.
doing more for him and Junior.
He put himself completely at risk.
On multiple occasions.
So I feel like that really changed his view on how.
And so
family can-
allowing him to remember that he had misremembered the former Tomorrow Billy's exhortation that we have to live for each other, instead of what Buddy had come to believe, that now we have to take care of ourselves. We have to be, we can't depend on anybody. And that, of course, is what Buddy has come to think, he hasn't depended on anybody. I don't know what brought his trust issues up, because we're not given that information. We don't know how he got in the place that he is.
It's a weird configuration though, because he's like, don't trust anybody, you can only trust yourself, and yet Junior relies on him and he wants these boys to rely on him. So it's like, you can't trust anybody but trust me.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I can't trust anybody but you can trust me. Like, it's a weird thing. Like, for me, I will help anybody, but I will not ask for help. It's kind of like a weird dynamic with him. Trust me, I don't trust you. Like, but you see him making those strides even initially. Like, he's saying you have to look out for yourselves, but Franklin, you go show Nightman how to do this. So Nightman has to trust Franklin to teach him correctly. Like, so even though he's saying these things, he's not modeling them.
Yeah.
Ever.
At one point, doesn't Buddy, or don't we see from, I believe it's Buddy, that he says that once you start, distrusting them, something about uniforms and passwords, and then you won't be able to trust them if they've forgotten the password. He doesn't want that to be his planet. He doesn't. He specifically says that it seems like he tries to come at them with this sense of, you're okay, until proven otherwise, like when Franklin is proven to be a thief. And then he's all like, well, wait a minute, you need to quit that. But he doesn't really distrust any of them either.
I think in some ways, Buddy didn't really finish the sentence. Because both he and Junior, I think you can't trust anybody just dead. Because, Buddy was always talking about how temporary his position of shepherding these boys was.
Yeah, new group is going to come in.
Yes. So.
And that's for safety, because if somebody gets mad, like Franklin, and says, hey, there's all these kids down in this basement, you need to take a look at that. And that was truly one of his fears, that to keep it moving and make sure that they can't be found.
And both boys neither have no father in their lives, and I think Mr. Poole was both accepting and complimentary, and they got it from nowhere else.
Yeah, and Mr. Poole and Malik both. I mean, Buddy chastises himself at a point and says, I should have trusted them. I should have trusted them. I don't know why I didn't. I should have trusted them.
But you see that in Junior, though, too, because initially Junior's like, I can't talk to Buddy about what's going on at Mrs. Pugh's house and all of that stuff. So you see that reluctance in both boys.
And he might have said that, I should have trusted him after he proved it. Did he after he went along with the lie? After Malik went along with the lie? So he's saying, I should have done it on faith, but he would now. But only after he heard it.
Emily, Consider Rebecca Best's definition of the other in regard to Lee's To Kill a Mockingbird. The other is that which one contracts one's, is it contracts or contrasts? Children like Scout and Jem develop their own personalities and find their places in society by copying the behavior of people in similar positions, by learning social norms associated with particular socioeconomic classes, and by learning to identify the other. Ironically, it is behind a false wall in a basement that the universe opens up to Junior Brown, Mr. Poole, and Buddy. How does their secret universe help develop their sense of the other as a group individually? Think about Junior Brown's weight, Buddy's home life, and how he separates them from one another. So you want to continue with that a little bit?
Yeah, so she talks a lot about how in To Kill a Mockingbird you have, just for example, Scout and Jem. And Scout in particular, because she's very much not your typical girl. If you've read the book, she identifies more as like one of the guys. She doesn't like to wear dresses. She doesn't like the color pink. So she's identified kind of as this other group separate from girls like her Aunt Alexandria and the girls at school. So I kind of connected that with Junior Brown, Mr. Poole, and Buddy, because they were very much identifying as their own group, as the other, if that makes sense. So that's really what stuck out to me, is because I see these parallels between these characters, and Best was able to group them in a way that defines them outside of the social norm. And I think that we see that what Hamilton does with Junior Brown, Mr. Poole, and Buddy is we can also like identify them as this other group, and what group that would be, kind of thing.
Mm-hmm. Now, well, everything is, hidden, and so much hiding going on. There's nothing at all in the open, ever, in that story. And so the other, in the way that they've configured themselves as the other, but nobody else recognizes. I mean, nobody else knows about them. So are they the other?
Exactly. And so I feel like they're also, they physically kind of become the other just because of their location in the school.
Mm-hmm.
The fact that they're hidden behind this wall, and ironically have this universe that's exposed to them that nobody else knows about. And that in itself helps them as a group identify as one cohesive individual person, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
But then individually they each have their other discourses and dynamics that separate them. But then when they go behind this false wall that only the three of them really know about, it becomes more than that, and they become a part of something.
Mm-hmm.
So
they become their own universe.
Yeah.
Their own solar system.
Exactly.
It's almost like the false wall is the mask they hide behind. Like it's where they are their true selves.
They're passing.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
And that's exactly, I had one question that I deleted.
That's great.
I had a question I deleted about passing, because I was like, well, we're not trying to pass as white, they are trying to pass as
There are lots of ways of passing, and it doesn't have to be as white.
I shall, but I didn't.
So, for instance, people who have some kind of disorder will frequently pass as, quote, normal.
All of us.
All of us.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's why we're English majors.
Yes.
Yeah, it's about passing. So it's not only in terms of race that one passes, that one can pass. It happens in lots of different ways, but the principle's the same.
Yeah, so before I move on, the way that I understand the other, I get it both ways, but I think it's challenging when Hamilton is also drawing on both Junior and Buddy and Mr. Poole. She's telling their stories because they're a part of the community that in other stories, especially To Kill a Mockingbird, Black men that are like them are the other. So this entire novel I thought was just, if we want to, this is an example of an other. So they're within themselves another, and then
And the other works, it's a binary system, so the
Yeah.
way we identify ourselves is by not being that person.
Yeah.
So,
We're either us or them.
us or them,
Yeah.
self or other, and I mean, that's how our culture works, and one is always privileged. So that men earlier defined women by their lack of a penis, for instance. That penis shows strength. And so it was a deficit model. They don't have that. So I don't know why they couldn't turn it around and say, well, you don't have breasts or a vagina. What?
You can't birth a child.
Can't,
See,
yeah.
trying to do that.
Talk about deficit. We don't even need you, really. But in that kind of system, the one that gets othered believes it. Sometimes, much of the time, until they don't. So it's a psychoanalytical thing, and it's a binary thing, and most of the time it's not very helpful. So we're all the other to some degree, depending on where we are.
And this is, I pulled up her article. She goes on to say, the interplay among various others establishes for the children the rules of acceptable behavior and interaction with others, and demonstrates the consequences of not adhering to the guidelines of their own group or their section in the panopticon.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's so interesting.
It is,
Yeah.
very much so. Jeannie, are Nightman and Franklin doppelgangers for Buddy and Junior at their first introduction at the end? Why or why not? How does a doppelganger function?
I think this is a unique way of looking at it, and it's caught my attention.
So doppelgangers that you will know of are, for instance, Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, Dr. Frankenstein and his creature. Who else? There are other doppelgangers, famous doppelgangers out there.
With the Hulk and Bruce Banner being.
Yes.
There you go. I love it.
Yes. That we all have doppelgangers, supposedly. Somebody who looks just like us.
Fight Club, maybe?
There you go. Ooh. That's interesting. But we don't talk about that.
Oh, that new movie. I'm talking about us.
Yeah, but Split is also one too. Well,
I don't know.
that's more about
But he's
personality.
that's multiple, yeah, that's schizophrenic.
But that would be right. The us one. There's two.
Yeah, completely. And Black Swan, Vertigo. It's been a long time since I've seen Vertigo, so.
Be in Rosemary's Baby.
Rosemary's Baby? How?
Yeah. That's one of
Well, it's one of the movies up
Yeah.
there. That's what she's
What would
asking.
be the doppelganger? Oh, maybe the old man or woman and the husband, maybe.
Maybe, yeah. Yeah. So the doppelganger usually possesses you have two sets of characteristics. So in Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, Dr. Jekyll is the good guy. Mr. Hyde is the uncensored id. But it contrasts the self.
So it's not an exact replica of you. It's kind of just
Like a
like
character form?
mirror image of you. Kind of like a picture of Dorian Gray type of situation.
I think that picture could be kind of his doppelganger. I don't know. Usually we think of it as an actual person. And it's a German term. Oh, der Doppelganger. So what brought you to that question, Jeannie?
Well, I just, you know, the mirror aspect of it, you know, the one boy leading the other, and the same for Buddy and Junior, and even from the not just their relationships with each other, but also their learning, their opening, their growth, and change, all the change that was happening, and their circumstances were the same.
Yes.
So to me, there were just lots of look in the mirror kinds of.
And so it offers, if Buddy is watching, it offers Buddy a vision of him and Junior Brown, if he's watching. But he's not, I don't think. I don't think he's observing that happening. Maybe then it's for the audience, the readers, to see that. I didn't see it, but that doesn't mean anything. But that's an interesting question.
And at the start, that's kind of what I asked at the interjection at the end, because there was, to me, there was a change. So maybe, well, I think I could just maybe justify both ends of it. Even at the beginning, because they were so, the children, so blind.
Mm-hmm.
And then through the growth. I think it mirrored the relationship with the boys too.
Mm-hmm. Is Junior's overeating an assertion of agency, or is overeating merely another aspect of his life over which he has no control? Or, to add, well, that being his agency, that he has control over it.
I think so. I mean, that makes perfect sense, just somebody who has had overeating problems. So, that's all I can control.
Yeah, and that is why, and adolescents are worse about this, about cutting. That's something that they have control over, and nobody else, and they don't even, they do it so nobody sees them, in fact. And part also of what that's about is making a pain, an emotional pain, physical. Because you cannot fight emotional pain.
And they don't, especially adolescents, they don't know. Like, I'm dealing with this with Evelyn right now. She just turned 12, and oh my goodness, she doesn't know how to handle the big emotions. And I have to explain to her that it's okay to not know how to. If I ask you what's wrong and you say I don't know, that is a legitimate answer. Just we have to kind of wade through this and figure it out. And that's why a lot of times kids will turn to controlling the physical, because they can't understand and control the emotion.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. Yeah. So I think it works both ways, because overeating, I'm not sure that he could stop overeating without help.
Which is what's gonna make him living on the street interesting.
Oh, yeah.
How long is that family aspect gonna last?
Uh-huh.
Whenever there's no food, because Junior has had it.
How does Junior Brown, Greg, this is you. How does Junior Brown's painting interfere with the mother's internalization of whiteness and her need to remove violence and that part of Junior Brown's conscious thinking in order to keep him safe? You want to address that a little bit?
Yeah, it really is. You go through in that article, she talks about the critical race theory and how it goes together, and it seems to be like there's a part in there on 133 where it talks about Junior's mother internalizing whiteness, and so I'm thinking about how she reacted to Buddy and how she reacted to that painting, and her fear of coming out into the violent world and the world of that really associates with his race, and how she's really trying to gear and guide him toward the way, maybe the mannerisms of the white race compared to the violence of what his race is. And so that kind of resonated with me, and I guess I settle on that for a question.
But it's a good question. It's a good question. And what exactly, how do we internalize these things that are not helpful for us? So for instance, it would have never occurred to me when I was in a discussion that, a group discussion, it would never occur to me that it was impolite of a man to interrupt me, because men do an interrupting thing with women quite frequently. Now, I've learned how to interrupt by watching that, in fact, and holding my ground. But I'd internalized that I was not the one that this person knows more than I do. Obviously. I don't let that happen anymore, and I've said to some pretty powerful people on this campus, wait a minute, I'm not finished. And I said it in front of a lot of people. And I thought, we've got this power thing going on, and he's got a lot more power than I do. But I said it anyway, because I get tired of being interrupted. Most women don't interrupt me. And I don't know if it's respect. I don't know if it's because they don't interrupt anybody. I don't know. There's been some pretty interesting linguistic analyses of interruption. I do know that.
So her internalized whiteness shows up with Junior's piano lessons as well. She sends him to a pianist that her family's never been through slavery.
Right.
Through 300 years of slavery. So she was like, didn't care if she was renowned, but that fact alone was the reason why Junior got to go to her. Despite the fact that her house was a mess. It was.
Did Janella ever go to her house to know that? Like, do we know that?
Well, she said, don't bring that dirt home. Don't bring the.
Yes, she had been.
Okay.
Because she saw the cockroach eggs.
Yeah.
Yeah.
She said, don't bring any of those bugs home.
Yeah, so she had seen it.
Yeah, so she didn't care about the bugs, but what she cared about was the fact that Mrs. Pease had never been enslaved.
Yeah.
That her family had never been enslaved.
So she wasn't, she was
never tainted.
exactly.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess that made her pure, and because of that, she wasn't pure.
And certainly cultured, but she was, I mean,
Yeah.
At some
crazy.
point, I'm sure she was like pretty normal, but
anybody?
like, but I picked up on her insanity pretty quick with the way they would describe her eyes when we would see her earlier in the book. And so when she ate the Vicks Vapor Rub out of the jar, it didn't really surprise me at that point. Like I kind of picked up on the crazy.
I had an aunt who did that.
Who ate it?
Yeah.
I mean, my mom would like put it on her lip.
It's not completely uncommon.
I cannot imagine.
Just
Look, that burn going all the way down.
I mean, it's greasy. Oh, look.
I bet she's everybody's favorite character.
Yeah.
I mean, I loved her. I thought she was fabulous. I mean, not fabulous in the traditional sense of the word, but you know what I mean.
Yeah.
I mean,
She's awful cruel.
she was
No.
described real well. Like,
Cruel, did you say?
To not let Junior play when that's the thing that he wants to do the
She
most.
believed, though, that she had destroyed that piano. I really feel like she
Yeah, she was
believed
pretty
that it was
gone.
unplayable at that point. And it wasn't until Junior discovered the piano that she goes, well, maybe I can fix it. You know?
But was it cruelty? Is it cruelty if you're not all here? Like, or is it just like
Depends on what part of you
psychotic?
because there are a lot of mean, crazy people.
Well, right, but like, is it cruelty if they don't know they're being cruel?
Yeah, it was
Like,
She was
or
protecting him because
does
she wanted him to
cruelty
be- she knows
imply
he has
intent?
to
I don't know. But experiencing it is,
It would feel cruel,
Yes.
but am I intentionally being cruel? Like, I think that matters.
oh, well, and I don't know. That's part of that's certainly a valid question to ask. But, you know, his mother is also cruel,
Oh, for
Yes.
sure. Yes.
but she's also mentally ill.
The only two people that do not have like any mental illness that we can see is Buddy and like Mr. Cool. I'm just like out of the main characters, I'm just like,
Malik, I think, is okay.
right. But I'm talking about out of our main.
Oh, yeah,
What
yeah.
about Roundtree?
Yeah, he is.
It's okay.
Even if he can't grow a decent afro.
That cracked me up.
I know.
Because I knew exactly what I was saying at that point. You know, it wasn't that he couldn't grow an afro, it's just.
Okay, I'm not gonna do you again, Alex. I meant to only choose one. Jennifer, connecting Leslie's article to Judith Butler's theories of performance, in what ways is the character of Janella Brown performing both race and motherhood?
It's not well.
So, Judith Butler came up with an idea that we just perform. There's nothing authentic about us. And she used drag as an example about how going drag is a sort of performance. It's put on for everybody. I am working on an article that says religion as depicted in adolescent young adult literature is a performance. And then I can go through and talk about how the actual church facilitates that through the ceremony, through the giving money, tithing, or giving money as the plate goes by, the garb, the regalia that the pastor wears. All of those things are part of a performance. It's not necessarily a bad thing, it's just a thing. And so, Jennifer, go ahead and pick up on that, if you will.
Yeah, so I actually struggled a little bit with this question. I was really looking at Mr. Poole first for performance, as he took on a lot of those like normal sort of feminine roles in terms of just nurturing and like encouraging the expression and things like that I felt you would typically see with a mother. And that kind of led me to thinking about Janella. But then when I originally created the question, which I talked today about at work actually, when I created it, I was thinking like in a general scope of how is she performing race. But when talking about it with a colleague of mine, she immediately started answering as how is she performing like being Black, basically. And the truth is, when I generated the question, I didn't have Black in mind. I actually had more white in mind when I generated the question, in the sense that she was kind of controlling and oppressive and neurotic and those kinds of things. So it was interesting to me. So like I said, I was a little all over the place when I generated the question because I did have Poole in mind in terms of performing motherhood, but then I wasn't sure, is that something I could ask? In the sense, he's not a mother. So, but yeah, so kind of all over the place, but that's sort of where I generated the question from. I still think it's a valid question, but I think it's perceived a little bit differently than I intended. Even though I read her character as being Black, obviously, in that sense. But like I said, in terms of her performance, so to speak, and kind of like what you guys were saying earlier, just on her sort of internalizing whiteness and things like that, that's more when I ended up with the question where I was going with it.
And that's one of the things that scholars have taken up is performing race and what happens in that process. We can also ask, how does she perform class?
Mm-hmm.
How does she convey a middle class existence?
With that turkey. Nice, and Junior's nice suit. Junior's got a nice suit, and it's mentioned a couple of times,
That concert.
Going out to the more hoity-toity, like, cultured things.
Of our Black, what did she
What did
say?
she say? Not neighbor, it's Black,
Our Black world.
yeah.
Mm-hmm.
That's what it was.
Yeah, so she's I don't know. It's really good. Regardless of what you meant, it's a good question, Jennifer.
That's why, like I said, when I was talking about it today, I like the question, and I like that it's more open-ended, I think, than I intended. But I do think it's valid. But when you were talking about church and things like that, I made that connection just as you were speaking to the class, because I personally see a majority of class as a major performance. So
for sure.
so that would be fascinating to me too. And I definitely think you could make that argument for Janella, who is trying to perform this middle class life. So.
And middle class mother.
Oh yeah, because you have to be the perfect, like even now, and not even just middle class, but just mother in general. If you're not Miss Peppy Pinterest mom, you're not a good mom. I'm just like, screw you guys. I'm gonna sit over here and drink my glass of wine, and my kids can make their own projects.
They can cook dinner for me too.
That happens more now than it used to.
So to the outside world, people who don't know Janella, and don't know the inner workings, what happens within that apartment, she probably looks like a good mother. Although she could be criticized.
Put together.
Yeah, she could be criticized, however, for letting her son be overweight. And you know somebody's going to do that.
Oh yeah.
And so in that way, she wouldn't be successfully performing motherhood. She'd be flawed in some way.
But like you said, how overweight is he really?
Exactly.
Well, and plus she is taking measures, and she can, if he doesn't lose, she can blame Weight Watchers. It's not her fault.
I mean, she's taking measures. She's taking public measures.
Right, exactly.
To make it look like she's trying to help him lose weight. It's not that she's doing anything at home.
Self-sabotage.
But everybody outside the apartment sees her taking her son to Weight Watchers, so that makes her a good mom.
Well, here's the thing, though. She's just going to get super busted by not making sure her kid was in school. Like,
For 2.5 months.
2.5, how do you not know?
Well, I mean, Mr. Poole was taking all the,
Yeah, he got the kinks.
I know,
without
but, like,
having other, and what was it? He tried to call and she was never available or
from
something.
a low socioincome school, like, we do home visits. You don't show up and you're under the age where we can withdraw you. Like, we come to your house and we bang on your door and we're like, where are you? Why aren't you in school?
Mm-hmm.
Like,
Yeah, but would that have been?
That wouldn't have been the case.
I was like, would that have been the
Yeah.
school system back in the 70s? Because
I don't
it
think
was
so.
a little bit more lax, I think, in that regard. Because at that, some teachers are like, well, if they don't want to be here, they're just not gonna, whatever.
One less student for me to deal with.
Right.
What about homework? Did it never occur to her that you didn't bring home homework this whole time?
They didn't used to have as much
Oh, really?
homework.
Okay.
I know, when I was growing up, I had a little bit of homework, but it's not near what
Oh my goodness.
our kids have.
Thank God, I'm glad some schools are finally going to we're not gonna give out that much homework. And like my kids' school this year, but we send home homework on Monday and they have until Friday to do it.
Mhm.
So it's not like a new assignment every single night like we did growing up. It was ridiculous.
Yeah, and I had the opposite. I could get mine done in homeroom.
Yeah, my kids do that a lot too.
She was missing though a great opportunity by having the piano quiet. Because, maybe people would have complained, but to have a son that could play like that, and even to own a piano, would also push her to certainly middle class, I think.
but can he play?
Yeah.
Oh, we don't
I'm
ever.
such a sucker.
Well,
He didn't
we
play
just
a single
assumed-
note in
Well,
the
he
book.
played
Well, no,
that concert.
he
though.
played in a little concert performance thing. That's when, remember at the park, that's the thing that kind of seemed to change.
But
the whole-
but he's the one, is he the one who tells us about that though?
No,
No,
Buddy does, because that's when Buddy notices a
But
change.
Miss Keeves is the one who sets it up.
Right.
So
But we're
Maybe
not
it's
told
not that
really
hard.
that he's that good. Like Buddy thinks he's
I
not a
understood.
good just because, Buddy might not know what's good and what's not good.
But Miss Keeves would. She's got a grand piano.
Well, maybe that's why she went.
She's also a hoarder who doesn't mind cockroaches. Like,
Or eating Vicks Vapor Rub.
She's very out
those slides. Can't be bad.
I know. Like close your.
Oh, go ahead and try it.
No. The baby will love it.
Sure. He already gets mad at me.
He will never cough.
Right. My kid will never have respiratory issues if I eat the mixed vapor cup.
I love this question, Jennifer. I couldn't overlook the fact that Leslie cites a scholar several times throughout her novel whose name is not capitalized, Bell Hooks.
Yes.
I went in search for an answer and found this assertion. She, Bell Hooks, chose the pseudonym Bell Hooks in tribute to her mother and great-grandmother. She decided not to capitalize her new name to place focus on her work rather than her name, on her ideas rather than her personality. Bell Hooks attempts to achieve the invisibility Leslie speaks of. Leslie notes in regards to the character Junior Brown that paradoxically, the qualities that make Junior stand out are the same ones that render him invisible. Ironically, Bell Hooks mirrors this paradox. Not capitalizing her pseudonym actually draws more attention to it, yet Hooks' goal is to achieve invisibility of sorts so that all the light shines upon her work alone.
That did bug me, like at first, until I realized that it was intentional.
Okay, yeah. And I grew up academically with her work. So
you were used to it? Okay.
Yeah, and I knew what was.
Because my first thought was, Dr. Stewart would not let us read an article that has such an obvious flaw.
He's a red pen.
Yeah. So yeah, obviously, you noticed that her name is not capitalized, and sometimes might have obsessed on it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Like whenever it's at the beginning of the sentence, then it's lowercase. That's whenever it really.
And especially when you try to type it, it won't, at the beginning of the sentence, it won't let you not capitalize. I mean, you have to really struggle with the.
You have to go in and say ignore.
And
then ignore again, because next time you save, it's like, oh, hey, you didn't exist.
And it might even do a grammatical thing, I'm not sure. Show it as ungrammatical with the green squiggles. Qualities that make Junior stand out are the same ones that render him invisible. So what are some of those qualities?
Well, my thoughts go back to his size, because I was that kid in school. I weighed 320 pounds. And so, people will either notice you because you're fat, or they will ignore you because you're fat.
Avoid at all costs.
That's what the novel talked about. It's like as soon as you noticed it, which is what made you stand out, they didn't want to look.
Right.
Which made them shrink.
Kind of at that point, you kind of just slide your glance over to the next person,
And there's a reason, for instance, for people who have physical ailments that we can actually see, that people will ignore those. They'll try to avoid seeing a person in a wheelchair or walking on crutches due to some kind of injury or amputation or something like that. And the reason psychologically for that is it makes us aware of our own mortality and fragility. That's what supposedly psychologically is what's going on with that.
I think part of that, I just kind of deal with that in my own way with Evelyn's injuries, but I know I keep coming back to that, but that's my life right now, y'all.
That's all.
But it's like people will stare at her and they want to ask, but they don't want to ask because they feel like it's rude.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So I was talking to my husband about it the other day. I'm at the point where I guess everything just feels so fresh that when people stare, I get mad.
Yeah.
And my husband's like, you have to, that's just natural. They're not doing it because they're being rude. They're doing it because they're curious. What's her story? What happened? What has she come through?
Yeah.
So I kind of wonder if that's how, what he goes through with his weight. I mean, as you said, when it describes how tall he is, it's well, really, is he that overweight? Or is he just a big dude, But
yeah, a linebacker.
Well, even being a big person, because I'm 6 foot tall. Chicks don't typically grow as tall as me. Like, I'm just tall. And so people, like, it's not as taboo a subject to ask a tall person how tall they are as it is to ask how much you weigh or something like that. But the same thing happens. Like, whenever, like, my kids in particular, my students will like stare, or like you can see it on their face, like, dude, how tall is she? Like, so I just ripped the Band-Aid off day one. I'm like, I'm 6 foot tall. Usually you see me in heels, so it puts me about 6'1", 6'2". Anybody have questions? Great. Like,
well, it's just like with little kids too, like going at the grocery store. I can't tell you the number of times my kids embarrass me by going, why is so-and-so so fat? Or there's one guy that would frequent the grocery store who only had one arm. And why does he only have one arm? And of course they have to say it loud enough and close enough to the people that they hear it. And so you're like, you have to do the whole, well, you don't ever know what's going on in their lives. You don't know what kind, they could have been born that way. They could have had an accident. And it's like, okay.
Okay, Berlin goes.
Now, yes, pretty much.
Yeah. Because kids don't have those filters.
Oh, to be innocent again.
Okay, please clarify more explicitly how separation based on class in the urban Black community at the time of the novel's publication is linked to the novel's underlying system of racism. All right, so you want to talk about that question a little bit? And that's on page 125.
No, I saw this and I just couldn't figure out how the author is gonna make a link between the two, the context in which this novel has been written, and because just put a few sentences here, and I couldn't understand exactly what he meant or how this separation based on class in the urban Black community at the time of at the time of the novel's publication can be linked to the system of racism in this novel.
Okay. So that we can get some context here.
Yes, the last paragraph, the concern over the.
Okay, so Monahan, that report was really damaging because it set the norm as whatever white middle class is doing, which is such a small percentage. But the white middle class at that time was also more, they had more power. Now it's the 1% that supposedly has all of the power. There isn't a middle class anymore. It's pretty much, I would be considered middle class if there were such a thing. So this concern over the conflation of race and class is reflected in Junior Brown, which was published in 1971 when the urban Black community was increasingly separated by class. Moynihan's influential 1965 report on Black poverty proposed some reasons and solution for this increasing divide, notoriously focusing on the perceived disintegration of lower class Black families. Caused debates within both Black and white society about perceived widespread subculture of matriarchy and about whether or not subcultures were, as Moynihan claimed, tangles of pathology. And I looked up that report, that tangles of pathology, and it's really unpleasant in many ways. And it's been pretty typical to conflate race and class, because they really are a challenge to separate, especially when we're talking about lower class. And even though there's a huge lower class white population, when you say lower class, I bet most white people think of Black lower class and poverty. I'm just thinking, I don't know, maybe some think about white, but especially if you're thinking about New York City and that area. And
when you think about the lower class, the aid, like the welfare, like Section 8 and food stamps and things like that, the stereotypical thought process is always on
Mhm.
the other races rather than those.
Rather than the ones that
Everybody.
actually predominate that particular, take advantage of that, of food stamps and welfare and more than any others, if I'm not mistaken. So your question then, let's go back to that. Please clarify separation based on class in the urban Black community at the time of the novel's publication. So we have this, everybody's buying into this separation on a class dealing with race at this point. And Moynihan's,
Tangled pathologies.
yeah,
Oh my gosh.
I know. Remember, this is the 60s.
Right.
Holy cow.
Contact.
Imagine being associated because of race as a tangle of pathology. Middle-class Negroes have even fewer children than middle-class whites, indicating a desire to conserve the advances they made and to ensure their children do well or as well or better. Negro women who marry early to uneducated laborers have more children than white women in the same situation. I'd really like to see the statistics on that.
Right.
Negro women who marry at the common age of the middle class to educated men doing technical or professional work have only 4/5 as many children as their white counterparts.
Well, they got real specific.
In a word, most Negro youth are in danger of being caught up in the tangle of pathology because they're born Black and this other class. So I don't know what contemporary scholars say about separating class and race, if it can be done. But in some ways it has to be done, because if we're going to talk about class and race, we must talk about whites as well. And that's leaving out a huge number of individuals who are lower class, who live at poverty level or under poverty level, or hover around it. And even then, what is poverty level? You know that in the past they have just changed the numbers to say, oh, well, that's our previous poverty level was here, so we're going to put it here. And look, magically, we don't have as many in poverty. How does that work? So where it might have been 20,000, now it's 15,000. And so anybody who's making over 15,000 is no longer considered in poverty, which we know is, of course, untrue.
Nice.
I don't know exactly how to explain, to give more of an explanation. What it says about matriarchy is really pretty interesting. The wife was dominant as against 20% white wives, whereas the majority of white families.
But you know what that says? That says to me, that's the nice way of discussing the absent father issue in a lot of the racial discussions, because that's even a discussion that happens now.
Oh, yes.
And I'm like, yes, okay, the women were more dominant, but why?
Because the husband, Janella's husband, isn't
They went
there.
out for smokes and then.
Okay. So that's part of what's going on there. Increasingly separated by class, focusing on the disintegration of lower class Black families. So, yes.
I interpreted that to mean like different classes within the Black community.
Mm-hmm.
Like Janella doesn't want to be like those people.
Mm-hmm.
That's the way I interpreted that.
That could very well be.
Because look at the way she treats Buddy.
Yeah.
And then she kind of throws it in his face, like with the whole, oh, your mom must not be able to afford me.
Yeah, so
I
you
wanted to
probably-
say, bitch, please.
I know, like, you
Even I can't do a
probably
whole
don't want to
tree.
get used to having me, so I understand why you want to have it. Like, who said that to a kid?
Uh-huh.
Like,
He certainly found her sore spot, though.
Oh,
Her
yeah.
soft spot. When he came back and said, "Oh, I'm not going to eat anything he wants."
Yes,
Right,
But
but
that got her then.
that goes back to Buddy knowing how to read people.
man, he's good. He is so
Right,
good.
He knows what buttons to really look for.
Kirsty, you're up. Considering when the novel was published, 1971, how did the undertones of the need for change in Western society remain relevant in 2019? Wow. What do you think?
I was thinking of, we've had a lot of recent movements, the Colin Kaepernick movement, Black Lives Matter movements, that just interest me in general. And so then when I was reading the article, when I was reading the novel, we get this whole like, okay, society needs to change, but has it really changed that much? I mean, it's just something I kept coming back to. We talked about it a little bit, like, slavery has ended, yes, but
So much else has taken its place.
yes, exactly. So many other things, happen every single day. And I feel like as the years go on, those things are brought to light a little bit more. So it's important to take literature that was written, in the 70s or whenever, back in the day, as my kids would say, and discuss how it's still relevant. Just because, segregation doesn't exist, with my air quotes, anymore, or slavery doesn't exist anymore, doesn't mean that those pieces of literature aren't relevant to the issues that happen today.
Yeah, lynching still occurs by the police who shoot unarmed black kids, black men.
Just because they look like they.
Just because they look like, yeah, and end up shooting them in the back. So when they're not going to be a threat. So that's a form of lynching. And I'm sure there's some scholarship on that, and I'm sure there's some popular articles on that topic. So there's something that takes its place because it seems to be a compulsion to push somebody down, to step on them, to step up.
Well, that's that psychological need to make ourselves be better than others.
Uh-huh.
And unfortunately, that's how a lot of people will just knee-jerk react and create the situations like that.
So they're different, but they're the same.
I feel like it's important to notice that, yes, change and progression happens, but those things don't just disappear. They just morph into something else.
Exactly. So they morph into, for instance, profiling.
Right.
Or the microaggression.
Microaggressions, yes. And there's a lot of macroaggression too.
And it's so entrenched that, it had to do with what you said. It's so entrenched that sometimes it's not even shooting the unarmed person as in they were dangerous when they weren't. It's the person who called and they misunderstood, oh, you're black, so you must be the perp instead of the person calling for help.
Instead of the victim. Yeah. Yeah. The assumptions that go along with all of that. So yeah, it morphs into different things, and things take its place, and it's never gone. It's almost part of a blood consciousness, I don't know, or blood unconscious, I don't know if there's even such a true thing, that it doesn't go away.
And it's never going to. It's not, we try to bring this whole, we should all be united and accept everybody's differences, and which is great. Yes, we should. I'm not disagreeing with that. I'm just saying that there's always going to be something.
Yeah.
There's always going to be those people.
Mm-hmm.
The other.
One other item. This book, though, I have to say, I thought it was shocking that this book's 50 years old. And
I know.
And even though, as she said, and I agree that it and you said, it doesn't go away, it morphs. But in this book, it was so on, and still really hit. Everything from obesity, still it's so current. You know, maybe, I don't know, I didn't even see the morphing really in, as far as today versus then. If I'd been guessing, I would have thought it was written last year.
Yeah, you really can't tell it's timeless right now.
Yes, and is that author skill? Or is that luck? Or is that insight?
Well, I think it's insight and skill.
See why it won awards. I mean, I guess then it was, I don't know if it was forward then or not.
Yes,
I guess
it
it was
was
on point.
It was.
But it's still on point, which is incredible.
It was very far thinking, very it was considered a really insightful text.
Well, this part of it, everything is so, I can't say the words, but you know, all the things that work together as a craft in the plot and the deeper meaning.
Complex.
That is a thing right there. But also just the fact that it's, as you said, Tom, it's just amazing.
Yeah.
Not too many books do that.
No, hardly any accomplished.
I don't know how they did it. She did.
Really amazing talent. Now, I will say that undergraduate students, I've taught this class in undergraduate courses before. They just said, I don't get it, and I don't understand, and I don't know what I think it's an inability to, it sounds so goofy, be the book, to live in the book and in the life of these characters. Maybe because it's so strange to them, these experiences, but I don't think so, not with the population of this university. Because we've got a really diverse population. We've got low income, we have fine income, we have a racial, whites are in the minority, only by 1 percentage point, but whites are in the minority here. So it's very diverse in that way, racially. So, I don't know.
You know,
I think part of it is the complexity, but like you were saying, like for me, and I just close your ears, Dr. Stewart, but I wasn't a big fan of this book.
You don't have to be.
When I first started it, I was like, I'm never going to finish this. But then I just felt so I guess I just pictured Junior as this kid in my classroom. And so that's what kept me going. I was so invested in that boy that it got me through everything else. And I think that's definitely author's craft, making it still so relevant, but still able to connect to those characters.
Yeah, it's hard to, you can't say, oh, I really like this book, because it's a painful book. And no, I don't think any of us want to hurt like that. And it makes us think hard thoughts, and admit to hard realities. So that's liking the book. I don't ever expect anybody to like it. I hope they find it interesting and relevant and insightful.
Well, and I just thought it was interesting that it was published 2 years after we landed on the moon. And so you have this really very progressive time in movement when everybody's on this hype of technology moving forward. And she touches on that, I guess, with the solar system and the metaphor that way. But I thought it was ironic that everything that she touches on in the book is something that's begging and asking for a progressive movement. During this time where all the focus is on progressing in technology, there are these other areas and avenues that need that kind of progression.
Need so much attention.
Yeah.
And aren't getting it.
Yeah.
Kinsley says, with such a diverse population in a place like New York City, how's the idea of whiteness as normal remain the subliminal standard?
Ideology.
Ideology. Well, and for a long time,
they're the ones that were the upper class.
Mhm.
That was what was normalized, you know.
Well, and the white people are still the ones who are in charge. It's still the dominant culture.
Yeah, you could be in the minority and still be in charge because of money and status.
And currently how the system's set up, that's how money and status, that's what the
It
people.
works.
Yeah, that's how it works. Not too much changes again. Leslie notes that Janella's sickness of asthma is one that is associated with urban apartment life, and her mothering is seen as intrusive rather than as nurturing. The author notes these as traits that keep Junior's mother from the whiteness she strives to achieve. Would these still be traits that disconnect a person from fitting in? Are illness and the concept of overmothering viewed the same way now as they were 40 years ago at the time of the novel's publication?
Well, helicopter parents now,
Oh,
and that's a very,
talk about overmothering.
We have lawnmower
I heard they're
parents
called
now.
lawnmower
Yeah.
parents now.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
They're not
mow-
helicopter.
mow
My
down
mom
all
was a
over the
helicopter
lawn.
mom. They just gonna plow you right over.
I'm all about letting my kid fall and hurt themselves. Yeah, that's how you're gonna learn.
so as far as like an intrusive mothering, like I think that's still, like in some arenas, that's still acceptable or at least expected, at least in education, right?
Right, but still like, that's kind of become the norm. It's like if you're not, so if you don't know every aspect of your child's, existence, then apparently you're not mothering correctly.
Well,
Like
it's
it's all
because-
over, like all these parenting forums and stuff.
So many
It's
parents want to be their
ridiculous.
kids' BFF now.
Yeah,
That's the problem. And so,
and annoying.
right. And so is it intrusive in that I'm intruding on their childhood because I want to be their BFF rather than the disciplinarian? Or like intrusive is such a gray word.
Mm-hmm.
For Black mothers, though, but first, especially Black single mothers, they have to take over the household in a whole new world where they have to hold up a Black identity, and the father's not there. I mean, she had to be both mom and dad for Junior, and to take care of him and be authoritative and authoritarian. That struggle could be perceived as overmothering. I mean, I've seen several Black mothers be almost seen as being abusive because they're being the authoritarian and the mother at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
That's a hard struggle, no matter what race,
And her illness, I guess, brings her back down to that poor mother, like that's having to be coddled by her own son.
But again, mental illness is not something that we as a society talk about. So I think it's a lot more prevalent than people.
In this particular scenario, though, it's not her mental illness we're discussing, it's her asthma. It's her physical illness that can be visibly seen. So how is that causing her to not conform to the whiteness?
How many people see that of her though?
Well, apparently enough people know that his mom is sickly, because that's how she's originally described to us, very right off the bat, as a sickly individual.
Mm-hmm. And maybe her sickness is a metaphor. I mean, here it's saying about associated with urban apartment life. I can't speak to that. But at a system that wants to crush non-white families and people, asthma is sometimes described as a crushing feeling. Yeah, on the lungs and on the chest. And racism crushes the life out of individuals. Is this about racism, this novel? Is it ever mentioned? Does it come up?
It's not overt. I mean, it's just, to me, it was a novel whose character, like at least it was written to be a novel whose characters were non-white. And so I didn't read racism into it. Now, I you know, you can find racism given the situations that they are unfortunately having to live in, because
Because it's institutionalized.
I was
exactly.
going to say, I think it speaks to flawed institutions and broken
Yeah.
systems.
Yeah, I would agree.
And is it possible for Junella to be racist against herself? Like,
Oh,
that's
yeah.
why she doesn't want to be black. She wants to be white. She wants to be the middle class. She's like, she's trying to push herself forward.
Well, and that's what that article, that's what the article pretty much addresses, is that the notion that she has internalized a desire. And it's not to be white. It's to have the same privileges as white people. So it is not about changing one's color or one's race. It's about having the same privileges as anybody else. That's what it comes down to. There's Jolene. Leslie states that the boys' homeroom teacher and Mr. Roundtree are both caught up in ways that harm them or makes them more black than white, as well as advance them socially. Some might argue that these two African-American characters are playing the game, assimilating in order to get ahead. Think back to the scenario in critical race theory with Jamal, a music producer who refuses to whitewash himself, and William, who has taken steps to make himself more palatable to white people. Is William, and thus the homeroom teacher and Mr. Roundtree, in the wrong? Or can they truly change a system from the inside? Are they taking care of themselves, but to the detriment of their fellow African Americans? That's a good question. Really, what is it that people of color are frequently told all of their life is that don't act like that? And they use some kind of imaginary, although it becomes realized, white standard to fit within. So then that's about, is there even is there a consciousness of it? We don't get to know anything about Mr. Roundtree and what his motivation is and what he wants to accomplish. Presumably, being a teacher is an accomplishment in itself. But the article, I think it was in the article, was that mentioned that that achievement itself, it's not about the kids, it's about social mobility. And I'm not sure that can be separated, because I'd hope that a successful teacher is going to have that social mobility, is going to be successful. But I don't know.
I can't remember exactly how it played, but in the book, when he was coming down on Buddy and Junior, they've been caught. But then it seemed to wipe that away, because somehow the scene ended, and he was taken into the next crisis. He had to drop their folders and pick up the other folders or something like that. It just seemed as if
They were boxed to be
real
fed.
change is impossible. Maybe not that strong, but
Well, if we look at it then, published in 71, is change possible? No. Not.
Yeah.
Jill, Leslie argues in her essay that the construction of a new solar system in the planet of Junior Brown symbolizes the restructuring of our society from a white-centric normality. Junior Brown's home and family are representative of white middle-class culture and the perceived need for black families to be more white to fit in. With those two arguments in mind, how would the addition of the planet of Buddy Clark have been a better representation to add to the solar system than that of Junior Brown?
But he already had a planet, though. Like, if you really think about it.
Yeah, his planet is tomorrow. Tomorrow is the basement. I think Junior Brown's necessary. He's the one who needs the help, the most help. He's the one that mostly is most at risk.
And he's the one that shows like Buddy putting someone ahead of himself, no longer looking for himself. Whereas if it was the planet of Buddy Clark,
Then it would be
then it would
the
be
opposite.
about me.
Mhm.
So if he wouldn't have changed, if he would have maintained that idea, then that would have been the addition to have.
I'm gonna stop at this point. Hold it. I know I'm missing some people here. I know I put Jamisa in. Jamisa, I'm sorry. I'm gonna go back and put yours in here, and we'll talk about Allie's and yours first thing on Wednesday when we start class. And I'll see who else I missed. I have 20, about 20 to go through. So I get mixed up along the way sometimes. So I'm sorry about that. And we'll talk about yours the first thing on Wednesday. Questions about what you're doing next week? It's pretty standard. So now you've seen some productive questions, and everybody found productive questions to ask. So I'm happy. And there you go. Okay, see y'all next week.